Welcome to From Connectivity to Connectedness. Welcome back for those of you who've been with us earlier this day, and welcome on board all of you who have just joined. Today, this is a conference where we are exploring how to innovate to build smart, sustainable, and prosperous environments for everyone in society. My name is Katarina Hägg, and together with a colleague of mine, Professor Roberto Verganti, I will be moderating the rest of the day. We are delighted to be part of the nationwide initiative Digital idag that aims at raising awareness in different sectors about digital innovation and transformation. This conference is also part of the outreach program at our House of Innovation with the research centers, the Jakob and Marcus Wallenberg Center for Innovative and Sustainable Business Development, and the Scania Center for Innovation and Operational Excellence. Our House of Innovation is also generously co-funded by the Erling Persson Foundation. To all of those, we express our sincere gratitude for supporting us. Now, before we move on to the third module for the day, just a few digital housekeeping rules. So we are recording the session just for your information. And we encourage you to engage with each other and with us. You can ask questions in the question bar below the screen, and you can, of course, also engage in the chat that you see on the right-hand side of your screens. There is a digital exhibition where you can find out more about the school and about our partners. And should you wish to share your insights, please use the hashtag #HoyDigitalDay. Now, let's move on to the third module, which is about smart organizations and how to build resilience, readiness, and agility. We will look at new ways to lead, at how organizations can empower their employees to be active and take part of the digital transformation that is going on in their organizations, and also at the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. To lead this module, you will meet Professor Roberto Verganti at the Stockholm School of Economics. Roberto is Professor of Leadership and Innovation at the House of Innovation. He is also the co-director of The Garden, which is a center for design and a research center for design and leadership. He is also part of the faculty of the Harvard Business School and member of the board of the newly established European Innovation Council. Roberto, over to you.
Thanks, Katarina. It's a pleasure to be here and be part of the Digital idag. And good afternoon to everyone. We will reflect together about smart organizations. And, you know, Katarina, one of the things that surprised me and always fascinate me when we are in front of new scenarios, new ideas, new contexts, is that we use old words to describe new words. And in this case, we are using smart organization, which are two old words, to describe something new, a space that is difficult to capture and to understand. And especially a word that is very fascinating being at university is the word smart. What does it mean to be smart? When we think about a smart person, we think a person which we give a problem to this person, and this problem is great in finding a better solution very fast. That's a smart person. But then, you know, for example, we want to design a faster car, and when this person is very great in finding the best solution to find a faster car. But then we think a little more carefully and we say, okay, but does it really make sense? So maybe a person that is smart is also a person that reflects about what problems makes more sense to be solved. And does it really make sense to design a faster car? And so we need another dimension of smartness or intelligence, which is the capability to make sense of the things around us, the capability to address the problems that are more meaningful to be addressed. So a person that is smart is not only a person that is good in finding a good solution, but a person that is capable of imagining a world that is more meaningful. And in this crazy world where things are changing fast and it's very complicated, a smart person is a person that is capable of finding direction, where to go and why to go there, and also finding the solution, so how to get there, and finding very fast. And a lot of solutions and a lot of decisions we need to take very rapidly in a small time. So this is a person, but the same is for organizations. Organizations that are smart, organizations that are capable of understanding what is meaningful, what are good problems to be addressed, how to solve them. And they need to do this fast and a lot of times. And in a certain way, so they need to take risk. So that's the challenge. We need smart organizations. And the novelty, the news here is that usually this has been done by humans, but nowadays we have machines. We have machines that can help us to be smarter. And this is a totally new space, because usually when we think about being smart and we think about digital technologies are automation technology. They usually help us to do things faster, more things, but they take a space of the hand. And in this case, they are taking the space of our brain, of our intelligence. So what happens when we have a challenge, and the challenge is to be smarter, and we have machines that can help us to be smarter? What happens where machines and humans meet together to collaborate? So this is the subject, this is what we will try to discuss today. And we will discuss this with very inspiring speakers. We will have two speakers first who will open the discussion and the reflection. Marco Iansiti, who is a professor at the Harvard Business School, and Archbishop Jackelén Antje, who's Iansiti Jackelén, who will inspire us by reflecting about the connection between humans and machines. We will also have four panelists for further experts. We will describe with more details later. But now we want to get, first of all, a little deeper reflection before going into fast conversation and before reflecting together. We want to have some inspiration. And I will start with our first speaker, who is Marco Iansiti. And Marco will take the perspective of business. He's a professor at Harvard Business School. So will help us reflect about how organization can create more value when humans and machine cooperate.
Ciao, Roberto.
Ciao, Marco. We start in Italian, of course.
Yes, of course, we have to. We have to. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a crazy morning in the US. I know.
It is insane today. It is completely insane.
So, Marco, welcome and thanks for being with us. You just published a new book, which I have here, by the way. Here it is. With Karim Lakhani, Competing in the Age of AI. And by the way, the people is connected to this event will and receive a copy of this book later from the organization. So, Marco, we have the chance to have the freshest insight on how people and machine can collaborate in organization to become smarter and create better value. So I'll leave it to you for 20 minutes, then we'll come back and we'll have a chance to ask you further questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Roberto. I really appreciate it. Well, there has been a little change, as you can see, in really the title of the book. It's not just the age of AI. We kind of scratched in. Things have changed a little bit since we wrote the book, which was published in January. So it was kind of an interesting thing. So I think right now, claiming it's the age of AI is probably unfair a little bit. And it's definitely the age of AI and COVID as far as we can tell. So many things have changed. So much so many dramatic developments, terrifying things, and inspiring things at the same time. It's an interesting time to see things evolve and to see things change. So I'd love to spend a little bit of time here just talking a little bit about some of the ideas in this book and how those have even progressed over the last 6 to 9 months. One of the things that's interesting about sort of where the book started is really conversations that I was having with Karim Lakhani back a few years ago. And this is around 2014, 2015. And we came upon this painting, which was really interesting to us. And it was just a fascinating painting. If you show it to many people, even experts, the reaction is, this looks an awful lot like a Rembrandt. This must be a Rembrandt, but I can't remember which Rembrandt it is. Like, I don't recognize it as one of the Rembrandts out there. And it's a fascinating painting. As you discover, as you look into it, you realize this was actually painted by algorithms, essentially. So you had a team of scientists that scanned in 3 dimensions all of Rembrandt's paintings, used algorithms to extract essentially key features, key style cues, and then used more algorithms to really generate essentially a meta Rembrandt. There is no man that this was painted after. It's fundamentally generated by really the synthesis of the existing Rembrandt portraits of this type. And then it's 3D printed with I think 47 layers of paint on canvas. And the actual resulting painting is striking. It really seems in many ways like a Rembrandt. And it's just a fascinating thing because you look at it on the one hand, for a minute, you think, wow, that's kind of interesting. It's kind of amazing what technology can do. It's almost like a positive reaction. But then as you think about it some more, there's a terrifying element to this. And it's like, oh my, like how could they even think about doing this? You know, what is more distinctly human than a great painting? And to go out there and mess with one of the greatest out there seems like a terrible thing. And one of the most amazing reactions that I just love is from Jonathan Jones, who is one of the preeminent Rembrandt critics. And he talks about this like complete travesty. And he is so outraged that anyone even contemplated do this, let alone do this, and then goes through this great analysis of how it doesn't really seem like a real Rembrandt, and it's got all these things that it's failing at. But it's just fascinating. And those reactions, on the one hand, marveling at what's going on the other hand, being kind of terrified by the reality of artificial intelligence is very typical of many of the things that we feel when we see something that had once been done by a human being, say, write a news article, and realize that it was actually done by artificial intelligence, and it fooled many of us. But there's also one additional insight that Karim and I spent literally years talking about this, and then finally sort of stood back and said, this is really interesting, and this is what it's about. And it's about the fact that it doesn't take a Rembrandt to paint a Rembrandt anymore. It doesn't take a genius to do something incredible. And in fact, if you look at the team that designed this, it's really more a design than a painting. Data scientists, a couple of AI people, smart people, intelligent people, but not geniuses. It's not like it's this remarkable thing. And granted, this is not a new style. It's just imitating an existing style. And yet, you have essentially very simple algorithms, comparatively speaking, that are generating a remarkable thing. That's a really important idea because one of the reasons why sort of this is so important is that we're not talking here about the future of artificial intelligence. We're not talking about machines that seem and act like humans that can be essentially indistinguishable from human being at all. We're talking about some very simple algorithm, very simple software programs. Essentially, it's a definition of AI, which we call weak AI, that says, look, any activity that a computer can do that a human was once able to do. And if you think about it, we encounter AI thousands of times, probably even millions of times every day. Every time we look at our smartphone and play with some application on there, we're probably sampling something that fits this definition of AI. And this very simple AI is really changing the world as we know it in a vast way with enormous implications. Just to give you one example to really land this, one example of AI it's a really mundane one, but kind of a fun one, in pig counting. Okay, so this is a company in China called JD Digits that wants to offer insurance to pigs. And there are many pigs in China, literally hundreds of millions of pigs. And so they developed algorithms that can recognize pigs. So you can do actual facial recognition on pigs, which I did not know before this. And it's kind of remarkable. And on top of it, you can see here the camera is sweeping on top of the actual pig pen and counting the pigs from the red to the green as plus ones. And, again, relatively simple algorithms doing something that humans once did. And here, just reflect on how different the organization must be that can do this digitally, as opposed to an organization that was doing this in the traditional way. And this is the original slide from JD Digits, which I love in its description, where they're talking very deadpan humor, difficulties in manual pig counting. And I don't know if anyone of you have ever counted pigs by hand, but it's really hard. Like, as you can see here, pigs have similar appearance and move around quickly. And you can kind of see how you can imagine the manual process being pretty challenging, and building an organization that counts pig manually is fundamentally different from building an organization that counts pigs digitally. And that's fundamentally the transition that we're seeing here in the business world in a variety of different use cases. Like, there's another one here. This is to convince you that anyone can do this. This is my co-author, Karim Lakhani, who I love dearly. He's actually not a biologist, not a doctor, not a medical specialist at all. But here is a paper that he co-authored that's in JAMA Oncology, which is a very prestigious journal in medicine, with a research team, which is primarily data scientists, developed in conjunction with a crowd that kind of helped surface the best algorithm. They developed a way to use AI to do lung tumor segmentation. And so they could essentially map out the tumor in 3 dimensions in preparation for radiation therapy to kill the tumor. And again, it's a fascinating thing. Again, it's a very different process. This one is essentially enabled digitally. You can see how the competencies, like, you don't need a radiologist to do this. And this can actually do as good a job as a radiologist with much experience, many, many years of experience to do it. It can do it much, much faster and less expensively. So these individual algorithms are really interesting in how they're really modifying the way that a lot of traditionally human work is done. Ant Financial is an interesting organization. Ant Financial is a financial services firm spun out of Alibaba, also in China, in this example. And you can see Alibaba invented this payment system called Alipay. And Alipay continued to grow over the years. And as it grew in 2013, they spun it out in an independent organization called Ant Financial. Ant Financial, named after the little insects, the ants. So many, many little transactions. Very clever name. And Ant Financial continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. And Alipay now is accepted and used by 1.5 billion people, maybe more, around the world, way beyond the traditional Chinese population. And as Ant Financial grew around Alipay, you see them introducing product after product after product based on the Alipay data and the capabilities that they're building on top of the AI that is interpreting the Alipay data. So they have a money market fund, Yuebao, which is a little red sack of gold on the slide, introduced a few months after Ant Financial started as an organization. In a few months, they introduced the money market fund, which is now the largest money market fund in the world. So scaling to enormous proportions. You have Gima Credit, which is a credit system to many, many, many people out there. My bank, again, to many, many people out there delivering loans and fortune for wealth management. And Ant Financial demonstrate what it's like when you have lots and lots and lots and lots of these algorithms. Not just one for pick counting, but literally thousands to do many different things. They're starting to form the core of the organization. Ant Financial works very differently. It has a very different way to define its business model, which is what it tries to do, and its operating model, which is actually how it does it. The way that it works is that it's enabling, from a business model perspective, a broad variety of tasks. Like if you look, this is all the different elements of the Alipay application, which is way more than a bank typically does. Anything from giving you air and rail tickets to actually managing your money, to doing credit card services, to doing packages tracking, all within the same financial services application. It talks about FinLife. So it wants to enable everything in your life. And as a function of doing that, gather more data, as you might expect, and enable more functionality to drive more transactions. The core of Ant Financial is essentially a software core. So this organization is serving 1.5 billion people, fundamentally with around 10,000 employees. Okay, that your typical large bank, like Bank of America, which is my bank here in Boston and in the United States, is the largest bank, I think, commercial bank in the U.S. And it has something like 100 million customers, and it has about 100,000 people. And so it's orders of magnitude less, and financial being orders of magnitude less people intensive than a traditional bank. And the core of Ant Financial is not a traditional organization. It's a bunch of software. And you have people that essentially have been moved outside of the critical path of product and service delivery. So they're not out there thinking about how to approve your loans. They're really designing and monitoring and risk managing the systems that are out there to approve those loans. Essentially, the bottlenecks here are digitized. Satya Nadella at Microsoft talks about this as the new runtime. So the new operating engine, if you like, of the economy. And so in many ways, so humans are being moved in some organizations, increasing numbers of organizations outside of the critical path of work into the design and monitoring function, right? While essentially the AI is out there executing the basic processes that award loan. And so the loan in Ant Financial is essentially awarded in 1 second with no human intervention, right? So this thing is just completely automated and just keeps on going. At the core of a company like Ant Financial is what we call an AI factory. And it's basically a systematic, structured approach to data processing, which is kind of like thinking about industrializing the data methodology around it. And so preparing the data, synthesizing the data, organizing the data, et cetera. And what we see in this kind of organization is that as it scales, the value grows in a very different way than in a traditional organization. So organization like Ant Financial has very little value with low volumes and very little scale. Like a payment system like Alipay doesn't deliver any value if people don't accept it universally. But as you have more and more people on it, you have the value that grows essentially in an exponential fashion, in a really dramatic way. That's very different from a traditional organization that is built around human organizational silos and individual subunits that is really hard to grow. Like growing an organization, making it bigger, it works less well. You try to restructure a little bit, grow a little more, but it has what we call in economics sort of diminishing returns, right? And as it grows larger, it works less well. An organization like Ant Financial or Facebook or Google Search works better as you grow it, as you get more and more users through it. So it's a fundamentally different type of thing when you build an organization on top of software, essentially, and software drives a critical path. Scalability is essentially infinite. or it's very high until something goes wrong. And you have organizations that have more of a digital model that are colliding against more traditional organizations in a variety of different spaces. Even in the pharmaceutical vaccine development space, Moderna Pharmaceutical is built very much like Ant Financial on a core of software and data, and is one of the fastest companies in the development of vaccines based on mRNA technology. And here in the US, it's among the leaders, among the top 2 or 3 in getting a vaccine for COVID-19 to market. So now things have really changed, right? And so with COVID-19, digital transformation is no longer an option. And we have seen, this is just a plot that shows the mobility, tracking sort of cell phone mobility across days. And in 2 weeks in the United States, mobility shut down. Europe is a little different. Sweden is, of course, a little different as well. But basically, COVID-19 has changed life for everyone around the world. And in doing so, it has accelerated the rate of digital transformation, the rate of operating model transformation, the rate of softwareization, the rate of building AI functionality inside companies, because it's just safer to do it that way. And it's amazing to see how people have adapted to this with dealing with lots and lots of uncertainty through a requirement for unprecedented agility. Moderna, as we talked about before, in the vaccine development space, built very much like a software company that just happens to do biology and vaccine development. My favorite example is Mass General Hospital in Boston. Mass General Hospital is an old hospital, 215 years old, where in dealing with the pandemic, you have people like Kelly Whitbold, my friend, who's an attending physician in the emergency room, who's been driving telemedicine for years and years and trying to get that adopted. And with COVID-19, it became adopted essentially overnight with lots of simple AI and simple data and analytics used on the fly to predict things like the availability of masks, even though our response in the US at the government level has been pretty much an unmitigated disaster. Individual heroes in my mind, like Kelly and others, have been out there transforming their own organization and driving value in the way that they can. Ikea, one of the symbols of retail, defining itself essentially as the big black boxes, the big blue boxes, I should say, this very store-centered model, going to a model which is fundamentally entirely online, virtually, again, overnight. Transformation extremely, extremely fast. Ultimately, we are dealing with an unbelievable amount of change. And the amount of transformation that we're seeing right now is just striking and cutting across almost every available use case in the economy. You can use AI to enable applications and drive efficiencies and drive innovation in a variety of different spaces, from chatbots to giving you more intelligence about your customers, to managing your supply chain, to automating some of the functions in the IT department, to doing a better job and a more faster job of research and discovery, developing an important vaccine like Moderna. And you can see almost an inevitable trend where human labor and management is increasingly moved out of the critical path of delivery. And so, a la Ant Financial, right? So instead of being out there actually doing the work and the tasks, it's, they're sort of overseeing, they're designing, they're doing other tasks, but fundamentally a very different definition of work going forward. And it's transforming our entire economy and creating a huge divide between those organizations and those people that can do work in a virtual fashion and digitized fashion, and those that cannot. At the same time, it's deploying incredible responsibilities to really think about this and to begin to articulate, how do we manage this? How do we regulate this? How do we connect to this in a way that does not destroy many of the things that we hold dear in our own lives? We have challenges of cybersecurity that are unprecedented, challenges around privacy that are unprecedented, challenging around algorithmic bias. How do we make sure that those algorithms that are running everything are not discriminating against all kinds of protected classes and so on? And perhaps most of all, an increasing concentration of wealth and influence that is happening in the economy, where we have digital haves and digital have-nots. We have half of the world's population that doesn't have internet. How is that going to work? How are the masses of human labor that have traditionally been necessary going to evolve with this? Is everybody going to be out there programming AI algorithms? And probably not. And so how do we deal with all of that? And it's a great discussion to have. Let me conclude with a few thoughts. First of all, thank you for listening. And I think it's crucially important to really spend the time that you're spending to understand and really anticipate what's going on around us, especially now with the pandemic, that things have accelerated in such a way. I think business and operating model is something that we have to embrace and understand and do it well. In other words, it's not possible, I don't think, to just avoid it and to stick our heads in the sand and pretend that digital transformation is not happening. And so my thinking, my advice is to go in there and think about how to do it and how to do it right, to preserve the kind of ethical concerns that we all have around this. Critical to this is invest not just in technology, but in human capability to work with and deal with technology, and the kind of architecture, organizational architecture that people like Roberto study so much to enable innovation around this. So let's embrace this and make it work well. You cannot build ethical solutions after the fact. I mean, there's a bunch of different digital organizations causing all kinds of challenges these days. They don't have it right. Traditional organizations changing at a rapid rate don't have it right yet either. It's time now to really think about how to build the right technology with ethical solutions embedded in the algorithms as we scale them up. And then finally, help the increasing population in greater need, which is almost an inevitable consequence of all the changes that are going on right now, especially with the pandemic accelerating. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Marco. Very inspiring. Actually, you clean a little bit of space to say there's no option that we cannot go there. The promise is to understand it better. So please stay with us, because we will have a session later with questions, and the audience can ask you questions that we can address together. But now we want to move from the space of reflection of corporation and business to the space of reflection of the human, the person. What does it mean this for us as humans? And we will do this with Archbishop Antje Jackelén. Archbishop, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, indeed.
Actually, you're here for real.
I'm here for real.
So finally you think...
Whatever's real in this world.
Maybe that's something we need to discuss about, what is real. But we have a little bit of discussion about you, and then we come back. So I'm really looking forward to reflect, because I'm inspired by the image that we will see soon about your presentation, about cooperation between machine and humans. And this is very something that we need to reflect. Marco said there's no option to avoid this. So how can we do this and grow and find more meaning in a world that is already going that direction? So I'll leave you the space. You can really physically go to the table and inspire us, and we will have questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Leading with the heart in the digital age. That was the heading that was given to me, and it may seem with Professor Iansiti that the brain has spoken, and now it's time for the opposite, the heart. If that is what you think, I'm afraid I will disappoint you, because it is about both the brain and the heart. It is only their togetherness, their connectedness, that makes for really smart organizations. Obviously, I'm speaking from the perspective of the Christian tradition, the tradition that has been crucial in forming the value system of those societies that for centuries have been at the forefront of scientific and technological development. Even in a global and more pluralized or pluralistic world, we keep seeing the influence of Christian values on the questions we ask, the qualms we are experiencing, and the solutions we seek. Christianity is basically a science-affirming and technology-friendly religion, because whatever helps people to thrive, whatever alleviates suffering, whatever is good for the most vulnerable is a sign of the realm of God. If engineering serves these purposes, it is smart in the sense that the organizers of this conference use the word, namely giving attention to meaningful and responsible change. Smart organizations are organizations that pay attention to that which is meaningful and responsible. And both words reflect deep humanistic values. You are responsible in response to another. You respond to the words, the glance, the gestures, the emotions, the needs, the demands of another. And you answer, or in Swedish, du ansvarar. In fact, this simple observation reveals something about the very dynamics of human existence. Life is relationality. Life is relationality. As persons, we relate to the rest of nature, as actors as well as dependents, dependent on the rest of natural creation for each and every breath we are taking. For our survival, we also need a second relation, namely to our neighbor, our fellow human being, realizing that we ought to build a world of neighbors. Since, as the pandemic teaches us, we are one humanity under one sky. Moreover, we need to relate to ourselves in healthy ways. And on top of that, as humans, we have never stopped seeking relationship with the transcendent. That which is beyond the tangible and knowable, beyond the calculable and the scalable. We call it sacred, holy, God. The very deep experience of our need to focus on and beyond the horizon in order to understand and make meaning of what to us lies in front of the horizon. In short, human life is marked by a relation to nature, each other, ourselves, and the transcendent, which makes a fourfold web of relationality. So how then does this fourfold web of relationality thrive in the time of the World Wide Web? How will it thrive in the age of AI? We are all excited about the enormous possibilities, but we also need to ask critical and self-critical questions. What does AI do to our human self-understanding? Who is benefiting in the short run and in the long run? Who is paying the price in the short term and in the long term? How will AI be good for the little ones, those who Jesus used to put center stage, knowing that what is good for the little ones is often good for the big ones as well. As Professor Iansiti said, ethics must be part of the discussion, and it must be so right from the beginning. It is not good enough to just follow the trail and call upon the ethicist only when we run into difficulties. If we want to build democratic societies that are good for citizens, ethics must be part of the whole journey. Ethics is a starting point and needs to be considered throughout the whole process and the life cycle of an AI algorithm. Theologians can be of help here too. Via their methods, they are trained to connect the dots in relating complex issues and ethical reasoning over the long haul. In times of profound and rapid change, we must particularly be mindful of our history, because people who lose or are deprived of their history also lose out on their future. Periods of great transition require spiritual resilience from individuals as well as from societies. And this is indeed the time for transdisciplinary reflection on how AI develops and will affect people's lives, societies, and the planet. It is time also for good old folkbildning, which has been a success in Sweden before. Otherwise, we might soon find democracy under serious attack. In terms of critical and self-critical reflection, what should we be aware of? Clearly, digitalization and the development of AI force us to rethink common concepts such as trust, society, communication and manipulation, human relationships, work, death, personal integrity, and privacy. The shift in the labor market from more people means growth to more data means growth is momentous. In fact, we will ask in you, what then is a human being? And like Pontius Pilate, we will also need to ask, what then is truth? Some individual aspects. Technological development is driven by the pursuit of perfection. Human creativity is driven by the experience of imperfection and finitude combined with the imagination of a wholesome future. That makes for an interesting tension. That would be a different keynote. Although in terms of connectedness, we may ask, has evolution equipped us to examine like what thousands of people think of us? How big a gap is there between ourselves and our digitally brushed up self-representations? And if that brittle social media popularity breaks down, what is going to fill the void? Software engineer Justin Rosenstein, who helped create the Facebook like button, says, when we were making the like button, our entire motivation was, can we spread positivity and love in the world? The idea that teens would be getting depressed when they don't have enough likes, or that it could be leading to political polarization, was nowhere on the radar. That good intentions can lead to bad consequences is nothing new. That has been the case ever since the gates of paradise closed behind Adam and Eve. Yet, in the digital world, the effects can keep spiraling on forever without much of an opportunity to haul things back in and make them better. We know today that social media technology impacts human interaction and self-esteem and has the tendency of reducing us to users, and even products. People are dehumanized and human dignity gets jeopardized. The technology that connects us also manipulates us, polarizes us, controls us, monetizes us, and distracts us. It leads us into self-exploitation, as German-Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han has observed. Already in 2010, Nicholas Carr, author of the book The Shallows and a number of subsequent books, stated, "Over the last few years, I've had an uncomfortable sense that someone or something has been tinkering with my brain, remapping the neural circuitry, reprogramming the memory. My mind isn't going, so far as I can tell, but it's changing. I'm not thinking the way I used to think." Our human emotions and fears are monetized, and people become products. Or as Jaron Lanier puts it in the documentary The Social Dilemma, it is the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your own behavior and perception that is the product. Some social aspects. Never before has such a small bunch of designers, pretty young white guys, had the power to influence how billions of us think, act, and live our lives. Technology is changing what you do, how you think, who you are, and constantly tracking the slightest changes. Surveillance capitalism emerges as a new kind of marketplace. The merchandise are we. It is a trade in human futures, to borrow Shoshana Zuboff's expression. Our attention is a gold mine, allowing our minds to be mined. Already in the design of AI, the risk of bias is obvious. Self-driving cars and the moral machine experiment have demonstrated that ethics are different across different cultures and groups of society. So who decides whose ethics should be involved? And again, it is multidisciplinary work and cross-sectoral work that is required. Another risk is that technical development and understand it to the point that there may be no human who really understands it. How then can we ensure that AI is serving the greater good? How can end users have trust? Here the joint work in the European Union about trustworthy AI based on fundamental values and freedoms and the cooperation across the EU member states is relevant. It intends to help the EU to develop its own approach to AI development and application relative to China, control of people, and the US, industry-driven, aiming at a better society and better lives for all. Which brings us to the political aspects. In all too many countries, people are drinking from a dangerous cocktail made of poisonous ingredients, all starting with the letter P, namely polarization, populism, protectionism, post-truth, and patriarchy. This poison deeply affects society. Polarization tears apart what should belong and work together. Populism pits people and so-called elites against each other. Protectionism puts one's own countries, one's own people's, and one's own groups' interests first at the expense of the common good. Post-truth is the contempt of truth that disfigures the vital triad of the true, the good, and the beautiful, without which we cannot live. Patriarchy continues to deprive the world of the full flourishing of women and children, and in the end, it dehumanizes women as well as men. Each of the 5 Ps reveals a surplus of fear and a deficit of hope. AI adds some further spices to this toxic cocktail. From Cambridge Analytica and the attempts to manipulate governmental elections, to the role of Facebook in Myanmar and Google's way of handling the Chinese censorship, responsibility and accountability are not really straightforward in these things. Adaptation and of legislation is required. Attention must be paid to ethics and trust. Anti-democratic uses of algorithms challenge not only the scientific and technological literacy of the world's population, but also its social, moral, and spiritual literacy. Global aspects. Trust. Trust may well be the ultimate currency for the future. The question of trust will be relevant to how successful we will be putting AI to the service of handling the climate crisis. We need AI development to be human-centric, or else we will face a dystopic future. And I'm deliberately using the word human-centric rather than anthropocentric, because anthropocentrism has been a driving force in the exploitation of our natural environment and thus instrumental in bringing about a host of environmental crises and climate change. By human-centric, I mean centered in humanistic values about human dignity and rights, and resolved to bring the fourfold web of relationality into flourishing. And for this to happen, we need lots of soft skills, but also laws and regulations to ensure that all technical development serve people and planet. Finally, what about being a leader in this situation? Being a leader is, of course, more than being a manager. To put it simplified, being a manager is about a position. Being a leader is based on relationships. A leader must have a holistic view of people and things, be visionary, build trust, cultivate hope, and lead through uncertainty. A good leader should honor the role of civil society. Since we need to revisit concepts such as work, consumption, welfare, fairness, equality, democracy, we need transdisciplinary dialogue in order to build up resilience. The time is gone when science, technology, and economics could do their own thing, with the humanities pushed to the very margins. We need to navigate in a landscape where good leaders need to be equipped with 4 equal sets of skills: technical and/or economical know-how, political realism, social responsibility, and spirituality. This, in turn, requires more than excellent training, more than utbildning. It requires a comprehensive education, bildning. The connection between brain and heart, if you so will. This also includes religious spiritual literacy, since, as I mentioned before, the beyond the horizon helps us to understand and to live in front of the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Archbishop. You can join us here while you join here, so it's not a long trip finally to be connected. We can move to one question to the public. So you've been asking questions, was checking the question that the public was answering during your speech. But first we have a question to the public, and the question is, what are the key features of an organization where humans and machines collaborate and in which you would like to be part of? So how do you imagine an organization that you would like to be part of and where humans and machines collaborate. You can see the question now moving under the screens. You know how to answer to the questions. You have a chat to your right. Instead, if you want to ask question to us, you have a question form on the bottom of the screen. And as you answer to this question, you populate the chat and you give us possible inspiration as an audience. I would like to go back to Marco and to Archbishop Antje with a couple of questions. The first to Marco. I don't know, Marco, if you're still connected. Are you still there in the morning in Boston?
I'm here.
Okay, fantastic. Marco, I will start from a question from the audience, but then I will add a little twist from my side. So the question from the audience is from Alexander, but by the way, it's the same name of your son, which probably is an inspiring question. So the question is, considering the example about Ant or Bank of America, the comparison with Bank of America, so Ant has, a lot of machines and software solving problems about, who could give a loan and so on. You said the Ant only needs 10,000 employees compared to 100,000. So are there 90,000 database jobs, scientist, engineer needed there? So, I mean, look into the future, where all these 90,000 jobs will go, which is a classic question about, which we are confronted when we think about AI. So, and actually it was captured by a sentence you said in your speech. You say, at the end you said, there is a problem of concentration. People think about concentration of wealth. In this case, the question is about concentration of jobs. And instead I was thinking, if instead the problem is a concentration of intelligence. Archbishop mentioned the movie that is investigating this moment of this. There's never been in the past such a small little amount of people, small bunch of software developers, who have been influencing the way we live. And by the way, you also added that this kind of small bunch of software developers are all white or males. And so are we going, Marco, to a period of concentration of intelligence? Because sometimes I have the feeling that these 90,000 jobs of Bank of America, they don't disappear, of course. But they are all becoming Uber drivers or food deliverers because the machines need us. We don't need machine. Machine needs us because we can still do physical stuff. We cannot deliver, the machines cannot deliver food yet, but we can. So I know you're a great guitar player, and I remember you playing fantastic solos by, David Gilmour about, if you're a guitar player, the solos of David Gilmour are the best solos ever. And there is a song by Pink Floyd called Comfortably Numb. So it's not that we are losing jobs. Do you think that we are losing spread of intelligence? So there will be a lot of concentration, and then a lot of us will become comfortably numb.
Yeah. What a great question. I do have, by the way, my guitar is right here. So it's not that we are losing jobs. Do you think that we are losing spread of intelligence? So there will be a lot of concentration. Yes. Well, before that, let me just say one thing to Archbishop Jackelén. Thank you so much for that talk, because I found it really inspiring, and I've never been on stage with an archbishop before, so I feel profoundly honored, and thank you for the perspective and the insights, because they're really important, and I hope we can do this again, maybe also to an audience here in the US that I think needs to hear many of the things that you're saying. It's really something, but I think the changes are really profound, because that ratio of it's 100 to 1, right? So you have 10,000 employees, so 1/10 the employees serving 10 times as many customers, essentially, with Ant Financial. And that is a really important ratio to think about, because it implies profound change in society at the economic level. And this is where there have been a lot of arguments about, what will happen to jobs going forward. I think it's very difficult to argue that we'll be able to preserve the kind of jobs and work environments that we have right now. Sort of the creative side as well, in the sense that, sort of there is a lot that AI will do, and increasingly the algorithms do get better and more interesting, and more apt to enable innovative processes and things like that. And so unfortunately, human work has been relegated to a very different kind of task. If you go to an Amazon warehouse, it's the computers that are telling the people where to go and what packages to pick up, not the other way around. So in some ways, the computers, and in some ways, are the managers and the people are picking up the boxes when they don't have robots that are designed to pick up the kind of shape of box. It's a pretty sad and depressing view of the future of human work. And the implications are profound, right? So I think it's true. I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to invent something here. We're going to have to think about sort of ways where people can add value in new ways. We're going to invest dramatically in capability for them to understand and leverage technology, but also beyond that, what are the other kinds of things? Maybe there'll be more musicians. I don't see sort of AI replacing that too quickly, but you never know. And I think there'll always be, it's like we love handmade things, right? It's special. And I think going forward, we would love, sort of human-made work and prize that in ways that we don't prize sort of something that's cranked out by an algorithm. I don't think people will value the digital Rembrandt as much as they will value a traditional Rembrandt by a long stretch of the imagination. And so, there will be some interesting evolutions there, some positive things, but people, I think, are dramatically underestimating the extent of that impact on society. Even now, the Archbishop referred to the future very often, which is inspiring and somewhat calming. I'm very worried about the present. We have an election coming up here in the US in a few weeks, which is susceptible to all kinds of manipulation that has been going on for a long time in the election process itself, as well as in the activities leading up to the election around media and so on. I think that we're living this as we speak, and the implications for society are there right now. And we're seeing fragmentation of society, the likes of which I haven't encountered in my lifetime. My mother might have with the experience through World War II and things like that. But certainly, I haven't seen that in a long while, and it's deeply concerning. I guess the bottom line is we're going to have to invent something. So Roberto, hopefully with your innovation program, you can figure that out because we have a lot of stuff to do.
Yes, we have a lot of stuff to do, and Archbishop, what makes us feel uncomfortable is that, as I said, artificial intelligence is entering a new space. It's not just another automation. Actually, it's very funny. It's de-automating jobs. We have drivers going around, but it's automating intelligence. Not yet the heart. Not yet the heart. So the situation makes us feel uncomfortable. And in front of uncertainty, we get a little lost. So you just published a book, which is, I find it very fascinating. And it's, this one here is, I'm not a Swedish speaker, but it's otålig in hoppet, which people told me is a concept between impatience in the hope, which sounds like impatient in the hope, which sounds like an oxymoron. It's a great invitation for me to finally to learn Swedish because I need to really explore this mystery of these two words that are in contrast to each other. And so machines are entering the space of the mind, and we feel uncomfortable. So is there hope?
Well, if we don't have any hope anymore, then we have ceased to be human beings, I think. The question of what can we reasonably hope for is as old as humanity, probably. But these are really challenging times, and I know there are a lot of dystopias, a lot of dystopia around, and there are reasons to be dystopic. But there need to be good reasons to hope, and that's why I'm trying to say in this book, well, there are still reasons to hope, and I'm trying to figure out the difference between being an optimist and having a hope. And by hope here, I mean really an active hope, and a hope that liberates your initiative, that appeals to the best sides of humanity, basically.
It's. I was taking note of something which is really, I was shocked. So, can I say that what makes us humans is not intelligence but hope?
Well, maybe there is something to it, because with artificial intelligence, of course, we ask ourselves, well, what is the difference? Is there any difference between artificial intelligence and our intelligence? Now, the difficulty with that question is that you run into the problem of what in the times of Isaac Newton was the God of the gaps. Whatever he couldn't explain, said, this is where God works, but the other thing is nature. And this was not very successful. And it's not going to be very successful to say, now AI can do this, but we can still do this. I think that's the wrong way to go. But it's rather trying to say, well, what is characteristic of our human intelligence? And I would say this fourfold web of relationality is part of being intelligent as human beings. And another feature, I'm not sure about whether AI will get to the same level as we, but somebody told me that, who is into AI research, that, well, still they are very bad at asking really good questions. Asking really good questions. I think that is an important feature.
And I think that this probably connects. I find a very strong connection. Marco is one of the most inspiring scholars in the space of innovation. I find this very strong connection, because hope, which is not optimism, I will come back to this later, because I always consider myself optimist. And now they say, no, maybe I'm not optimist, I'm hopeful. And because optimism is about a vision of the past or projection of the future. It's a forecast.
Right.
But instead, hopefulness is about imagining. It's about imagination. It's about imagining, not forecasting. It's about imagining the future. And that's what innovation is, what design is. I mean, you need to imagine things.
Yeah, to go back to the image that I had of the horizon, hope is actually, optimism is extrapolating from what we already know. It just prolongs the trends we have been seeing. But what hope does, it really keeps the eye on the horizon, and it takes in what is out there to understand where we are now and to change where we are now. So hope is a power for change.
Interesting. So Marco, and I don't see on the screen now, but we are, I didn't know that, but we are soldiers for hope in the way we teach innovation and design. So we in a way, we have this. And with Marco, we just published an article on how innovation is changing, and really saying that the core of innovation in the future will become sense-making, not anymore problem-solving, because problem-solving is done by the machine. But sense-making, or asking the right questions, is something that hopefully will stay human for a long time. So I think it's time to engage other speakers in the discussion. And so I will open up, and I think they are connected remotely, to 4 more panelists, so we can have more contribution. And you talk about critical thinking in your speech, and to be critical, we need to expand the level of insight. So I hope they are all connected. I don't still see them in the screen, but I suppose they are all connected. And we have 4 additional panelists and thinker. The panelists are Jakob Kiefer, who is head of the government relations and public affairs at ABB, which is our Swedish leading global engineering company. Oh, now I see them. Fantastic. Peter Fischer, who is the director of the Switzerland's Federal Information Technology Steering Unit, which ensure implementation of the information and communication technologies around Switzerland. Pia Sandvik, who is the CEO of RISE. RISE is the research institute which collaborates with university, industry, and the public sector to develop knowledge in Sweden. And Antoine Pernet is the CEO of Plus Experience, an organization that supports people in organization to develop their soft skills. So thank Jakob, Peter, Pia, and Antoine to join us, and thanks Marco and Antje to stay with us. And we will do a little bit of first question to the new panelists, and then we will complement with questions that come from the audience to dig a little deeper about, can we be hopeful or not? And first to Jakob Kiefer. And Jakob, you're working in ABB, which is considered to be a traditional company. Marco was talking about finance, and finance is done on number, and it's easy to transform into digitalization. But what you do in your organization is a little harder to transform into numbers. So how is your organization dealing with digitalization and transformation? How is it collaborating with machines? Can we still talk about traditional industries or not?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel. I feel a bit going down to the more mundane business after I listened to the Archbishop. Thank you very much for a very interesting piece of putting the whole digitalization in a more spiritual, but also, I think, human aspect. And also thanks to Marco for your insights. Listen, I will try not to be too complicated, but ABB is traditionally seen as a normal industrial business-to-business company. We are based in Switzerland and merged in 1988 with the Swedish Ikea, worked mostly with energy, but today we're in robotics, in artificial intelligence, in automation, electrification, engines and drives. So I joined this company coming from the diplomacy a year ago, seeing a company that really was, at the verge of being at the center of what it really needed at the planet at this point. And I think when we talk about digitalization, this is not just something we put here. We use digitalization for something. And first of all, we have to adapt our way of working with digitalization through our customers. If it's no use to our customers, we wouldn't digitalize. But we see today that we need to be more efficient with energy. We need to be more efficient with the way we produce stuff. So therefore, we always put our customers first. But it can be difficult to, as Antje said, how do you put the humans first? We are business to business, but we are people working with other people in other businesses. So when we try to talk about how do you digitalize and how do you put robots in your production, we do it out of how do you make dull works disappear? How do you make dangerous works disappear? And usually we do this in centers and we go through the whole process and see where are your gaps when it comes to energy waste? Where are your gaps when it comes to repetitive jobs? And how can we help out? So I think we really have an approach from the human side, but the solution is through digital means. So I think this is important to remember that the customer is right, but the customer can also be assisted in knowing a little bit more what digitalization can do for their business. I don't know how much time I have. Do you want me to go on or stop? I just say a few more words on our co-workers. We are changing so rapidly now. And I think, what will people do in the future? I think this was Antje also touched upon. What will be the future of work, for example? We need to really look hard at our own employees to reskill them, to retrain them. And this is something that is easier said than done. And we need to collaborate with others here. We can come to a certain distance to retrain, but at a certain point, we might not have the engineers that we had hired 30 years ago that are relevant today. How do we care for these people? Can they stay in the company or do they need to move on to something else? And here we really need to talk to the academia, to the society, to the government to see how do we have on-the-job skilling. Because digitalization is becoming more and more complex and the operations are becoming more complex and we need to move along with this.
Jakob, can I, because I have a curiosity since a couple of minutes and now I'm hungry. So usually when there is people in these kind of events talking, you have head of IT or head of innovation, and this is a surprising event because first we have the Archbishop here next to me and Marco is we're teaching, but then you have, you are the head of public affairs and government relations, and you said you come from diplomacy.
Yeah.
What's going on here? So why a person comes from diplomacy is talking about digital transformation?
Well, I think you have to understand that we are going through, this is not just digitalization, it's like the industrial revolution. We're at a point now where society is transforming, and I've never seen so many global challenges in front of me. And I thought I had worked 70 years abroad. I worked with business in China, in Chile, and I saw this. But what I was lacking was a little bit the communication between decision makers and business. It's like business is here and society is there, while in fact they're part of the same whole. But they don't know how to communicate well. And we need solutions quite rapidly now if we really are to fix the planet. So I thought if I join a company like ABB, which is really the bloodstream of industrialization to some extent, maybe I can do a little bit more use there. So that was my drive. I felt that I had worked 25 years in diplomacy and wanted to try something different. And I don't regret it 1 minute, because there's so much great interest from the government, from academia, and it's a great interest from our side too to be part of this journey ahead. But as a diplomat, if you put on my other hat, of course, I fear the 5 Ps as much as the Archbishop does, of course.
But this is very inspiring, because maybe that's what we need. We need this kind of different perspective, and I mean, it's really, that's really was in a way was surprising. You know, a hard, traditional organization and an expert in diplomacy. So probably we need more on this, and also that maybe we need to, instead of looking at the problem with a narrow view, to open up and diplomacy connect us with the context. And how to make sense of what's happening around us, which is another ways of what we were discussing before. And maybe the next way, I will come back to Jakob later. So trying to move a little bit around, so we keep the conversation alive. And because we connected to this idea of diplomacy and looking at the big systems. And we have Peter Fischer connected. Peter is the director of the Switzerland Federal IT Steering Unit. I mean, that's what is bigger perspective than looking at the implication for an entire country. Peter, how do you address this transition from the perspective of big system of entire country? You probably help your organization in your country to move into this transition. How do you help them? What is your vision?
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing the Digital Day and for inviting me to this panel. That's a great honor for me. First of all, I think there is no just one size fits all. That was, by the way, the conclusion of a discussion we had yesterday at the Swiss Embassy in Sweden, which was held in a hybrid format, obviously. So the actions of government in organizing or in taking part in the process of digital transformation has to be embedded in culture, institutions, institutional organization, and the general policy, which for Switzerland, for instance, does mean the culture is very much based on self-responsibility, autonomy of the individual, of very federal organizations. We have a very strong federalism with the 3 levels of communities: local, cantons, regional, and the national level. And we have traditionally an industrial policy, which is quite a hands-off policy. And we went quite well, I would say. Economically, the country is in a good shape, actually. But it has to be also tomorrow. So what can be done for that in the context of digital transformation? Swiss government is obviously not absent in that context, but is supporting digital transformation by several initiatives or several levels. First of all, education. Education at primary, secondary school include technological information, technological training, include the way that you can use technology also, already in very early educational times. Then, of course, having top universities such as the polytechnical schools in Zurich or Lausanne, which we also use, by the way, in developing the Swiss COVID app, which is a very highly data protective and personal individual protective manner of digitalizing the contact tracing. Then second initiative is all around basic research. Basic research in computer science, cryptology, biomedicine, big data, artificial intelligence, and so on. Obviously, very often in the context of the universities, but also in the context of collaboration between private economy companies and the universities. Third level of intervention or of action for government is grant for the basic infrastructure. That starts with communications infrastructure. We have quite a high density of broadband and a very good coverage of broadband. So the state grants for universal services by obligations, struggles a little bit with the introduction of 5G networks because of local resistances, which are very often also a little bit in the context of fear of new technologies. And that has to be dealt with, obviously. Fourth element is to support a startup ecosystem around the university very often. Next one is to adopt the regulatory framework, not to hinder innovation, but to let innovation be done. But sometimes you have to adopt the regulations also for helping new technologies to get in. For instance, blockchain, where in Switzerland, with a traditional strong financial market, we introduced a regulatory framework, a light-handed regulatory framework, in order to help fintech companies to develop in Switzerland. And finally, one of the elements that we are dealing with today at this panel also is awareness and public debate, also about ethics. And I'm personally convinced that only that society will have success in digital transformation, which is able to integrate digital transformation in the society and the context of society and ethics. So we have different initiatives in that way. And I'm very glad that the Swedish Digital Day is also dealing a little bit with this public debate.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. You raise a question that I would like to come back later also with Mark and Antje, but which is connected to the next panelist, because there is a question about education, knowledge, and where is the knowledge gap, what we still need to learn here. And Pia Sandvik is the director of the RISE, who is coordinating different research institutes in Sweden. And when you look forward and try to imagine what kind of new knowledge we need here, you're one of the main players. So what is your understanding here? What is the new knowledge that is needed to address this new scenario?
I'm going to put two different points of that. First of all, I would say that at least in Sweden, and I think in many parts of the world, we don't have systems for really connecting to lifelong learning that will be needed for the future, or actually already now, because we see a lot of students coming out from the universities. They are engineers or studied economy or so forth. And normally, back in the old days, you could sort of cope with a 5-year education from university, and then you could sort of learn while you were working, but that won't be the case anymore. I think we need to have structures. We need to have education at universities, at our employees, the whole system for lifelong learning, in order to make it possible for citizens, for those that are unemployed, for those that are employed, to really continue to build up new knowledge in order to be able to have an employment in the future. So I think that's one really important perspective, and the systems are not there, at least not in Sweden, I would say. And the other thing is that we all normally, when we talk about digital transformation, we focus a lot on different technologies. And of course, there are some really important things that need to be taken care of, and technology is one of the solutions. But I think that in order to do a good transformation, I will take one example. We have put together a strategy work in Sweden on an AI agenda. And we have done that in 5 different perspectives. We have focused on research, we have focused on education, and we have also focused on like digital platforms or test facilities. And then we have looked at what are the changes that are ongoing or needed in the future in the private sector, in the public sector, but we also have a societal and a citizen perspective. And that is sort of from a country view or a society view overall. But if we look normally, when you have to change your business or whatever, you don't start in a technology. You start to think about how do we need to change our business into normally be relevant to the future. And I think it's really a lot of things that has to do with changing the mindset of employees. It's also about the organizational culture, but also a lot of different processes. And after that, when you have sort of put down the foresight of your organization for the future, then you can really understand how the technology will fit into that. And of course, then you have to do a lot of investments in R&D and in different competences and skills and things like that. And I think the change and the transformation that we are going through now is so broad that you have to have a lot of cooperation with others in order to share experiences, to share some technology infrastructure, to share education structures and things like that. And that is really, really something new. And there was some discussion earlier on in this debate regarding also unemployment. And I think that it's really necessary to have a change process, both on, I would say, on a national level and on a global level, that really looks in how we should transform the knowledge and the skills that we all have in order to be relevant for the future. I think that's really, really important to take a lot of away some of the fear as well. There has never been any revolutionary technologies back historically that hasn't gained as much jobs as that has been there before. So probably we are facing jobs in the future as well, but we just don't know what they will look like in the future.
Thank you, Pia. Very, very inspiring. I will do a second round of questions. Actually, I will do two rounds of questions, and starting from a question from from the audience. There's from Luis Ayo, and Luis asks, "What should we as leaders and influencers in our relevant circles do to steer the trends to a better place?" Okay, so what should we do? And so my question, I will change a little bit, and I will move a little bit more personal in this case. So if you don't feel to answer, we can. But the question will be to each one of you: what are you doing personally? What you're doing is changing. How are you changing the way you think, the way you do your work? So the first question would be to Mark, and how the way you teach is changing now because of this. So so I will move a little more personal. What you are personally doing in this moment in your life that you are changing to address this new scenario. And if you don't feel to get so personal, Marco, you can, instead of talking about how you changing, you can talk about how HBS is changing, and Archbishop, you can talk about how the church is changing. But
I didn't realize that commentators could change questions from the audience here. That seems like way outside the. I'm going to think about the ethics of that a little bit.
So, but that would be. Meanwhile, you can think a little bit. So, how is your life changing? What you do change it to address the new scenario? And then I will ask you next another question. And it'll be a little bit more of a concluding question, which is, and it will be a question to the entire audience. The question will be a tweet So if you were to tweet about the future of a smart organization, what would you say? So I will ask you to write down a tweet, which is the summary of our reflection today, and possibly to write it down in a piece of paper, because otherwise we talk, and especially me and Marco, we are Italian, we like to talk. But we need to write it down in 140 characters. So please get hold of a piece of paper, and then we will write it down here. So, and if you don't have it, I have a little bit of a nice pen here and some paper, so we can contribute. So it's here, by the way. So I should have some white paper here somewhere. Here it is, and this is a bigger pen.
Okay.
For you. But we'll go back to that later. First, we want to move a little more personal, starting from Marco. Marco, how is your job changing? How are you changing the way you teach? We talk about diplomacy, about Peter was talking about educating people in different way, also Pia. So how are you changing the way you teach?
Well, from a teaching perspective, I think it's changing a lot of things. I think the Harvard Business School, I think, defined itself as teaching by the case method, which is done, in a room of 90 people and specially designed auditorium and all that. Now, all of that is out the window. We have, a couple of billions of dollars probably worth of buildings that are pretty much unused right now. And all of the teaching is done online, which is, I think actually it's fantastic. If we do it right, it expands the reach and influence, and we can do so many more interesting things and reach so many different people that we could not have reached before. So I think from that perspective, I think I'm lucky in the sense that particular aspect of my job has changed, I think, in a very simple way. Many of my colleagues don't feel that way at all. They hate it. They absolutely hate not being in the classroom. But from my perspective, I think it's fine. Another way my job has changed is I spent many years running a department at Harvard Business School and really fundamentally building this from the ground up. And so for 10 years, until last December, really spent the time hiring people from very unusual backgrounds from Harvard Business School. So people that are experts in privacy, people are experts in artificial intelligence, computer scientists, PhDs in AI. And we have now a very different junior faculty than we ever had before. And it's been fascinating. We've been taking the bridge over to the computer science department and integrating with them quite closely, because many of these issues of management and leadership really fundamentally change. And you have to have an understanding of how issues, for example, of ethics, are really profoundly influenced by the computer science behind the ethics. And you have fields of philosophy, religion, computer science, and management that fundamentally are merging in many ways into one, as the implications of these issues are so profound. Yeah. And how we train leaders that we have to transform how we do it and who is doing it.
Yeah. Marco, I need to confess one thing. I was thinking, if I ask a question myself, how did I change the way I do it and the way I teach? I confess that Monday I taught by cooking pasta. So what did you do to change it? I cooked pasta. So the first time, it was 2 in the night, because in Boston it was 7 in the night, but it was a great excuse to reflect about the meaning of things and why we cook pasta the way we cook. So in reality, digitalization enabled us to do things I would never do before, because I never had the kitchen in a classroom. So maybe we should have more kitchens, and that's a good suggestion also for SSC, and instead of more spaces to sit.
And more music. I have to say, I can see Jakob in the background also has a guitar sitting there. So I think we might, we could do an improvised.
Oh, fantastic! Then I'm curious now. I want to see the screen of Jakob and see which kind of brand is the guitar, and we still need to fix the problem of the delay in the connection digitally, but we will do it. Archbishop, how are you changing what you do in your life?
Well, personally, of course, it's a lot about educating myself. And since my background is, my research background is in the relationship between science and religion, now it's more moving to this technology and religion. But also in practice, I mean, as everybody else, we have been doing things digitally more than ever due to the pandemic. and our communities have made great experiences with going digital with worship services, reaching so many more people, but also experiencing how do we live this? We are used to having this sense of a local community, and all of a sudden the boundaries are blurred, and that is good in many things, but we're also losing something. So I think the future for church life is not going back to non-digital, but it's going to be hybrid, both digital and very much also like trying to find good ways with physical embodied communion.
Can I ask a crazy question? It's maybe, but no, there are in healthcare there are digital doctors. In education, Marco, I'm scared because now with artificial intelligence, there are maybe digital professors. We will have digital priests.
Oh, we already have. We are both priests that have their main work to be in social media, but we also have this in Sweden, jourhavande präst, which is the priest on duty that you can call on the phone, but that you also can reach by chat. And during the pandemic, numbers of calls, both phone but also chat, and chat is predominantly young people who use it, has really exploded. So there's a great need for pastoral care online, and we are even trying out an application that enables family counseling online, and that is also. I mean, we were going to do it anyway, but with the pandemic, we have accelerated this development.
I don't move it too much extreme if we have artificial intelligence as a priest answering questions, but that maybe is too much. Okay, so let's go to Jakob because we want to see the guitar there now. Where is the guitar? Let me see. Where is Jakob? I see a little bit of a Fender, maybe. I don't know if it's a Fender.
Yeah, it's true. It's a Fender Stratocaster.
It's a Stratocaster. Fantastic.
It has a delay as an add-on. But listen, I really like this discussion because it's a little bit all over the place, and yet I think Antje, you're touching something so important there. I mean, what is the meaning? Why do we go to our office? Why do I work? And now we work in a different environment, which is not even the workplace I used to go to. So I think this pause, this hiatus we've been forced to have due to COVID has been a very human thing for all of us. And as a company, we must make sure that we feel safe. And now we have to build the team without being physically present. This raises a number of issues. I mean, can you actually have an office in a company with 110,000 people that never meet each other? Is that something that is foreseeable future? So I think, why do we go to the office? But I think my employees and my co-workers, they go to the office because they're not there only, that was perhaps the case 30 years back, go to the coolest company that produces robots. They want robots to do something better. They want to be part of a drive that changes the planet in a positive way. And we have talked a lot about the fear about digitalization, but there's another question or a few questions. What if we don't use digitalization to measure the electricity? What if we don't use AI to measure where we source our products? What if we don't measure? So I think there's an alternative cost to this, but we have to deal with the real fears that are there. I remember when I worked in Chile and we tried to say, listen, this workplace down in the mines, you're going down 5,000 meters up in the mountains in the Andes. Is that a good place to be 12 hours per day, dusty and all those things? Why don't we make this an automated mine? And the unionists were not too keen on this. They didn't like it because they worked there for 5 generations. But their health was, when they were 55, 60, it was very difficult for them to continue to work there. And then we enter the discussion, okay, if you can't work down in the mine, what can you do outside the mine? Can you work remotely? And all of a sudden you have a discussion, but some of these people could probably not be part of that future mine. But it's not a responsible way to say, let's continue to have you down in the mine like you did in the 19th century. This is not acceptable from a human standpoint. I think we always have to make a job safer and more efficient, but we have to take care of the human, but not try and save jobs that are dangerous or monotone and things like that. So I think that's where we come from a little bit. We have to be part of that transformation, but do it in a responsible manner.
Good, good. Peter, how is your life change? How is your job change? I mean, what do you do to address this?
Well, traditionally, I would have launched a strategical process and been having a lot of discussions with people to define strategy and methods and processes and so on. I think what is asked for today, especially in the government's services, public services, is to go and look at the needs of the customers of the public services and to look at their situation and start from their point of view. Normally, administration is starting in reading a law and sorting out what that means and what kind of services that they would have to provide for. But now we have to go differently. So my work consists much more now to go to the public services responsibles, to bring them to the customer's perspective, and then start from that point of view how to design, how to provide, how to produce the services that they need. Very many services, they need them because they have to need them. So it's not a market. It's a monopolistic game, but even there, the most important is to start the perspective of the customers and then take the possibilities of new technologies in order to redesign the whole work of the and products of public administration.
Thank you, Peter. Very rapidly, we move to Pia. Pia, how is your work changing? By the way, Pia, one thing that I would be interested in, and maybe we'll talk about this another time, is one day there will be artificial intelligence will do research. So also the job of researcher will be lost because it's done by that. But that's another story that we can talk another time. But how is your job changing? How is what you do changing?
I will start with where I was inspired by Jakob. Why do my employees go to work every day? And they want to make the world better. And normally the solution, we come from applied research in technology. But what I can see and what we have been changing and where digitalization has been one very, very important enabler for actually creating a better world, better health, better democracy, better technological solutions, and in that perspective also better welfare overall. But I can see that what has been changing is that we see that we can't just work on the technological solutions. We also need to put this into a context where we study legislation, we study ethical aspects, and sort of the whole context where technology is working in. And from my point of view, we are much more in my management team, we are much more foresighted, try to see what is really going to happen if you go in that path. We are more agile, much more involving a lot of different organizations and people into discussions in order to understand what way we should take and what is the right path to go, as I said. And of course, the ethical aspects that normally hasn't actually been on the agenda when you're talking about technology as they are in for the moment, when you can use the data in so many good ways, but also in so many bad ways.
Good.
And finally, I would say something about lifelong learning. 2 sentences. We have identified that it's really important to enable for the public sector also to go through this transformation that is going on for the moment. So we have actually launched an academy for lifelong learning together with Google, Telia, Ericsson, and IT and telecom companies in order to really support public sector to also understand what will their role be in the future.
Good, thank Pia. We need to run because we are a little bit late on the schedule, so I will jump directly, given that we are in a society that is fast and resilient and responsive, I will jump directly into the Twitter question. So if you were to tweet about the future of smart organization, what would you say? This is a question to everyone, not only to the speakers, but to the entire audience. The audience can write it down in the chat, or you can be even better, you can tweet it, which is even better. And for our speakers, I'm curious to see what they wrote on a piece of paper. So I'll start from Archbishop here, Antje. What did you write?
Well, I wrote, mind the fourfold web of relations in the WWWH. Be citizens, not products. Care about the young. And then I have a number of hashtags, AI, critical accompaniment, ethics, democracy, living hope.
Thank you very much. Marco.
AI coming fast. Rethink leadership implications as soon as possible. And help.
Thank you, Marco. Jakob. If you can read it, that's well, yeah. But
yeah, I stole our slogan actually because I think it's a good slogan. It says our slogan is "Let's write the future together." But I think we should write the digital future together, and we do it for the purpose of creating a more sustainable world. I think that's basically what our business is all about.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Well, I wrote down smart organizations are open for flexible cooperations, integrate business and technology, and build their success on smart people.
Thank you very much. Pia?
Be open, agile, cooperative, and never stop learning.
And my tweet will be, thank you. Thank you very much, because it's been a fantastic sessions. So we run into the next final concluding session. Sorry if we take a little longer, but really a great sign of gratitude for all of us, because it's been very inspiring.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
And we will have some interesting news from SSC, I think. So we have 3 minutes of a little bit of rest.
Exactly. Yes, that's true. We have some news from the Stockholm School of Economics.